Hello, and welcome back to the start of another great school year. In this presentation, you will learn about a few adjustments that have been made to the Washoe County School District Teacher Evaluation System in order to align with the new statewide evaluation system, the Nevada Educator Performance Framework, or NEPF. Nevada state law requires that all districts use a common teacher evaluation system, and in 2014, the NEPF was approved for both teachers and administrators. However, the law does allow for districts to apply for a waiver to use an alternate system. WCSD applied for a waiver to continue to use its version of Charlotte Danielson's Framework for Teaching, and was approved by the State Board of Education in April of 2016 upon demonstrating alignment and equivalency to the NEPF. In order to meet the state's definition of equivalency, some of the language in the rubric had to be modified. There are 22 components in our teacher evaluation rubric. 11 of the components had to have some degree of modification. Here is an example of minor wording adjustments in a component. Please turn in your rubric packet to component 1E on page 5. The red text indicates the adjustments. The NEPF distinguishes performance levels by how many students are impacted. In several of the components, the word most was added to the effective level, and the word all was added to the highly effective performance level. Now turn to page 8. You will notice component 3B has more extensive language adjustments. Additional text was added to meet the equivalent standard of performance. At this point in the presentation, we will pause and give you a few minutes to look through the rubric and review the areas of language adjustment. The list of the 11 components is provided here. As you read through the components, please discuss with a neighbor something new that you notice, especially at the effective or highly effective level. Now let's take some time to think about the new language in the rubric. Working with a partner or small group, discuss and record on the note-taker provided what these changes would look like or sound like in the classroom at the effective or highly effective levels. Notice on the note-taker we provided a possible example for component 3B. Now we will discuss how the NEPF rubric and the WCSD rubric were crosswalked to determine equivalency and alignment. Please take a look at your copy of this document while I explain how it is constructed. First, notice the 4 standards and 22 components from our version of the Danielson framework are across the top, and the NEPF's 10 standards and 34 indicators are down the left side. Now look at the top half of the crosswalk. Just the first 5 NEPF standards or the instructional standards. To demonstrate equivalent expectations of NEPF Instructional Standard 1, Indicator 1, language from Danielson's 1A, 3A, and 3B were combined. As you move down each one of the NEPF indicators, you can look across at the colored boxes to see which WCSD Danielson components were combined to demonstrate equivalency. All new language that was added to our rubric, the red text we examined earlier, was based on NEPF rubric language and is required to demonstrate equivalent expectations. Now we will discuss how the state scoring system works. While you will still be evaluated using WCSD's version of the Danielson rubric and rated on the 22 components in that rubric, the overall scoring has been changed to comply with the state NEPF scoring system. The first thing to notice is the first 5 NEPF standards, the instructional standards, are weighted as 60% of the total evaluation. And the 5 professional responsibility standards are weighted as 20% of the total evaluation. So collectively, the qualitative portion of your evaluation counts as 80% of your evaluation in the 2016-2017 school year. We will discuss the other 20% later in the presentation. Now let's take a deeper look at the individual components and how they play a role in your evaluation. In the Instructional Standards section, look across the row titled Frequency. This indicates the number of times each of the Danielson components were utilized to meet equivalency for the Instructional Standards portion of the crosswalk. You will see that some of the components were utilized more often than others. For example, in Standard 1, Component 1C was utilized 6 times. It was used more than any other component in Standard 1. And Component 3D was utilized most frequently within Standard 3, a total of 7 times. Looking at the crosswalk as a whole, all of Danielson's 4 standards and 22 components were used to establish the alignment and equivalent expectations to the NEPF's 10 standards and 34 indicators. As discussed, some standards and components were utilized more often in the crosswalk than others. This alignment places heavy emphasis on our Standard 1, Planning and Preparation, and our Standard 3, Instruction. While we know how important a positive and productive classroom environment is, as addressed in our Standard 2, Classroom Environment, the NEPF places more emphasis in the area of instruction. This is why you will notice that our Standard 2 as a whole accounts for only 11.7% of the evaluation. Similarly, our Standard 4 plays a significant role in the NEPF Professional Responsibilities category, but because these 5 NEPF standards only comprise 20% of the total evaluation, our Danielson Standard 4 holds just 12.4% of the final evaluation. Please take a few minutes to discuss with a neighbor or neighbors a few things you have just heard about the crosswalk and scoring of the evaluation rubric. Now we will discuss how a final qualitative score is calculated. In alignment with the state scoring system, the final qualitative score is derived from a series of averages. Here is an example of how the score on the qualitative portion of the evaluation will be determined. Please remember you will be rated on the 4 standards and 22 components of the WCSD version of the Danielson rubric. For NEPF Standard 1, Indicator 1, the rating on the 3 Danielson components that were used to establish equivalency, 1A, 3A, and 3B, are averaged together. Once all the NEPF indicator scores are determined for Standard 1, the indicator scores are then averaged to determine a standard score. A score will be determined in this fashion for each of the 10 NEPF standards. Then, the 5 instructional standard scores are averaged together to determine an instructional category score. The same will happen for the 5 professional responsibilities standards to determine a professional responsibilities category score. Once the 2 category scores are determined, the appropriate weighting is applied to each category to determine the final qualitative score. This score is 80% of the total evaluation. In order to determine the overall level of effectiveness, these scoring ranges were developed by the State Teacher and Leader Council and approved by the State Board of Education. Starting in the 2016-2017 school year, the self-evaluation that is completed towards the beginning of the school year will now calculate an overall rating based on the qualitative rubric. This self-evaluation rating will not be included in the final evaluation completed in April and is only there for your personal reference. In this presentation, we have discussed how the qualitative rubric makes up 80% of the total evaluation for the 2016-2017 school year, 60% coming from the NEPF Instructional Standards category, and 20% coming from the NEPF Professional Responsibilities category. The other 20% will be determined from student outcomes. Currently, 10% will be based on the student target attainment of the student learning objectives completed, and 10% will be based on state outcomes. At this time, the State Department has not determined what data will be used for state-level student outcomes. In the 2017-2018 school year, those percentages are expected to change. At this time, the law states that 40% of your evaluation will be based on student outcomes. Thank you. Have a fantastic school year.